Let us all observe a minute of silent prayer. Amen. Secretary, please call the roll.
The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Honasan, Ontiveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Subiri, Senate President Pimentel.
Isa pa. Okay. With 15 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 52nd session, Monday, February 5, 2018, and consider the same as approved.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion to dispense with the reading and to consider the said journal as approved is hereby approved.
Thank you. Mr. President, we'd like to greet welcome the guests of Senator Pacquiao, Mayor Gaspar Chilagan Jr. of Aguinaldo, Ifugao, Mr. President. And we have the graduate school students from Leyte Normal University, Tacloban City, headed by Professor Ibarra Villarino. We'd like to welcome them to the Senate, Mr. President.
Welcome to all of our guests.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Resolutions. PS resolution number 603, entitled Resolution Directing the Appropriate Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the ongoing selection of a third telecommunications operator with the end in view of ensuring that our national security will not be compromised in the process. Senator Laila De Lima.
Referred to the Committees on Public Services and Science and Technology.
PS resolution number 604, resolution directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the undue preference given to China in conducting research in Binham rice, officially known as Philippine rice, thereby giving them access to strategic information that would endanger our national security, especially via the Philippine Sea, and possibly pose larger security issues over surrounding areas, including the Western Pacific Ocean region. Senator Laila De Lima.
To the Committees on National Defense and Security and Foreign Relations.
Communications, letter from the Office of the Undersecretary for Migrant Workers Affairs, submitting to the Senate the biannual report to Congress on assistance to nationals for the period January to June 2017 in CD digital format pursuant to Section 33 of Republic Act number 8042, otherwise known as Migrant Workers and Overseas Filipinos Act of 1995 as amended by Republic Act number 10022.
To the Committees on Labor, Employment and Human Resources Development and Foreign Relations.
Letters from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, transmitting to the Senate copies of the following certified and authenticated BSP issuances in compliance with Section 15, Paragraph A of Republic Act number 7653, the New Central Bank Act, Memorandum number M-2017-040, dated 21 December 2017, and circular letter number CL-2018-005, dated 12 January 2018.
To the Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions and Currencies.
additional reference of business resolutions. PIS Resolution number 605, resolution directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the incidence of faceless money. Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III.
To the Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies.
PIS Resolution number 606, a resolution commending and congratulating Jerwin and Cajas for winning the International Boxing Federation Junior Bantamweight title, Emmanuel Manny Pacquiao.
To the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move to resume consideration of the following: PS Resolution 504-510 and the privileged speech of Senator Subiri under Committee Report 232 and Senate Bill 1662 under Committee Report 233. These measures pertain to the inquiry on the death of Horacio Atio Castillo due to hazing and strengthening the law of hazing, respectively, Mr. President. So I move that we consider all of them.
Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. The parliamentary status of the measures is that we have already closed the period of amendments. However, we were informed that members and Senator Gordon particularly is requesting that we reopen the period of individual amendments so that he can introduce his amendments. So as one who voted in favor of the motion, I now move for the reconsideration of Senate Bill 1662 under Committee Report 233.
Any objection?
Consideration of the measure in the period of individual amendments, Mr. President.
In effect, we are going to reopen the period. Is that Majority Leader?
Yes, Mr. President.
Any objection to the motion, which will result in the reopening of the period for individual amendments? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. And also for the record, that was the last motion that we approved, therefore. So now I move to recognize the chairman of the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, Senator Pampilo Lacson, and to introduce individual amendments, Senator Richard Gordon, Mr. President.
The sponsor, Senator Lacson, is recognized, and for purposes of introducing amendments, Senator Gordon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of my good friend, Senator Lacson, I'd like to propose an amendment on page 16, line 13, add the following, and this is pursuant to my interpellation the other day, including but not limited to suspension or revocation of his or her professional license for a period of not more than 3 years, period to be reinstated as a member of the respective professional board. Such professional shall submit affidavits from at least 3 disinterested persons, good moral certification from different unaffiliated and credible government, religious, and social civic organizations, and such other relevant evidence to show that he has become morally fit for readmission into the profession. So that the provision, when read from line 8, Mr. President, would now read as follows. Provided further...
What page, sir? What page? Page
16, Mr.
Page 16.
Page 16, line 13.
Line 13. Okay, yes, sir.
So that the provision, when read from line 8, Mr. President, would now read as follows. Provided further that should the former officer, non-resident member, or alumni belong, not belongs, but belong to any other profession subject to regulation by the Professional Regulation Commission, PRC, he or she shall immediately be subjected to disciplinary proceedings by the respective professional boards, including but not limited to suspension or revocation of his or her professional license for a period of not more than 3 years, period. To be reinstated as a member of the respective professional board, such professional shall submit affidavits from at least 3 disinterested persons, good moral certifications from different unaffiliated and credible government, religious and social civic organizations, and such other relevant evidence to show that he has become morally fit for readmission into the profession. I submit, Your Honor.
I'm inclined to accept, Mr. President. However, some members of the, some colleagues would want to take a look at your proposed amendment because they don't know or they don't understand what to approve, Mr. President.
Mr.
But,
President,
I-
if the distinguished gentleman will not mind, may we have a copy? The minority leader also asked me, may we have a copy of the proposed amendment so that we can vote intelligently on the amendments, Mr. President?
It's a long enough proposed amendment that we need a written copy of the amendment.
So while we are being given a copy, I'm not the only one who should be given. All the members should be given. So I move for a minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session is suspended.
Okay na, Frank. Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, the other members do not have a copy of that. I'm sorry. You will have.
Yes.
I beg your indulgence. I move for another minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session is suspended. Walang copy.
Kailangan ng kopya o Frank. We're ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Before the sponsor accepts the amendment, may we hear from, again, the proponent, Mr. President, Senator Gordon.
Mr. President, you will recall that in my interpellation, I referred to the Supreme Court, and Senator De Leon had a lively discussion on this matter, saying that the Supreme Court is the principal agency that has sway on all matters in the practice of the profession. That's a constitutional provision, Mr. President.
Of the legal profession.
Of the legal profession.
Yes.
Now, with respect to the other professions, Mr. President,
Yes.
it would not be a level playing field because the Supreme Court can say, all right, sa mga abogado, kailangan, katulad dun the case of Argusino, he just submitted the, he was required by the Supreme Court to submit the certificate of good moral character from different unaffiliated and credible government, religious, and social civic organizations. And he was reinstated, Mr. President. Now, when you talk about the professionals, Mr. President, it would be uneven. So what we're saying is, and I just want to correct because I wasn't able to spot this. I've been very, very tired because of the hearing this morning and last night. The provision will now read, provided further that should the former officer, non-resident member, or alumni belong to any other profession subject to regulation by the Professional Regulatory Commission, he or she shall immediately be subjected to disciplinary proceedings by their respective professional boards, including but not limited to suspension or revocation of his or professional license for a period of not more than 3 years. Such professional may be reinstated, that's a change, Mr. President, not to be. Such professional may be reinstated as a member of the respective professional board. Such professional shall submit affidavits from at least 3 disinterested persons, good moral certifications from different unaffiliated and credible government, religious, and social civic organizations, and such other relevant evidence to show that he has become morally fit for admission into the profession. I'm merely leveling the playing field, Your Honor. And so it is not automatic. He may be, depending on the recommendations and his actual condition, Mr. President. Subject to style, Mr. President.
Subject to style.
Subject to style, accepted, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Any objection from the floor? Hearing none, the amendment is approved. Subject to style.
There are no more individual amendments, Mr. President. I move to close the period of individual amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
I therefore move to adopt the findings and recommendations contained in Committee Report number 232, Mr. President.
Any objection to the motion, which is to adopt the findings of Committee Report number 232 and approve the same? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Now, Mr. President, I move to approve on second reading Senate Bill 1662 under Committee Report 233.
Any objection? Hearing none, the said measure is approved on second reading.
Mr. President, I move to...
Majority Leader, Senator Subiri.
I move to...
Wants the,
I'll just say this.
okay.
before we move for the suspension of the measures, Mr. President.
Okay. Senator Subiri is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm overjoyed by today's session due to the approval of the anti-hazing law. I'd like to thank the Majority Floor Leader for giving this his utmost priority. He mentioned yesterday that it's been several Congresses that he's been fighting for this. Thank you, sir. We'd like to also thank especially the chairperson of the Committee on Public Order and Security, Senator Ping Lacson, for shepherding this through several hearings and investigations. We thank you, dear sir. The family of Acho Castillo is here with us, the Castillo family. And we are elated by the quickness of the approval of the said measure. We'd like to thank all our colleagues for giving it its full support and allowing the passage at the soonest possible time, as soon as the committee report was approved by the said chairman. The committee report, both on the law as well as the committee report on the investigations will be a big help on the civil and criminal cases filed by the family against its perpetrators. And I thank Senator Lacson for the very strongly worded committee report in the results of the investigation on the Acho Castillo, as this will help their family in the cases filed in court. Because the investigations here in the Senate, of course, weigh heavily on the findings of other of the judicial branch of government. And I'd like to also invite, and Senator Gatchalian, I'd like to invite, I thank the authors as well, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Joel Villanueva, and Senator Richard Gordon, and all the members of the Senate for helping us shepherd this through. And as a gesture, Mr. President, when we approve this on third and final reading on Monday, and I believe it will be set on Monday, with the permission of the principal sponsor, Senator Ping Lacson, and the permission of all our members, if it is all right, Mr. President, if we can invite all the other families whose sons and daughters were victims of hazing to come during the third reading approval and show to the public that hopefully with this approval, it will be the end of the injustice caused to their families and to future families. This will finally stop the hazing done to our children. So maraming salamat po, Mr. President. Congratulations to the 17th Congress for the approval of this measure. I'm putting the cart ahead of the horse because we have not yet ratified, but I'm sure this will go through ratification very soon. And again, I'd just like to thank all my colleagues for their support. Lalo na si Chairman Ping. Chairman Ping, maraming salamat po. Chairman, thank you. Thank you, guys.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Senator Subiri has just touched a very soft chord in this representation because, well, I'm glad that this time around we have the family of Atio Castillo with us, and they are surely hell-bent on seeking justice. I'm glad, Mr. President, because I have a bad experience. I've had a bad experience on a hazing case in San Beda before of Mr. Marvin Reglos, who was also a law student. And he died of hazing. The three persons who were charged were in the provincial jail, Rizal Provincial Jail. And I gave Marvin Reglos' family a lawyer to handle. The lawyer, in fact, is the Secretary of the Commission on Appointments now that you have appointed, Mr. President, Secretary Hector Villacorta. The case was prospering well, but there was a time when my wife, who was doing a movie, had a was filming in the Rizal Provincial Jail. And she was there with her aide, and one of the suspects who was there approached the aide of my wife and told him to tell me na pagbutihin ko raw dahil lalabas daw sila. I was really perplexed, Mr. President. I didn't know at that time how to handle the issue, but I was really angry, is the word. But nevertheless, fast forward. After a year or two, I found out that the case was dismissed. They're out. He was right. And I asked why, and we tried to investigate. Apparently, nagpa-areglo yung pamilya. Na-areglo. Nawala yung kaso. So, Mr. President, this time around, I don't think it'll happen. So, we thank again the members of the Senate, particularly the Chair of the Committee on Public Order and the Senate President for this law finally seeing the light of day. So with that, Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration of Committee Report 232 and Senate Bill 1662, hopefully a third reading on Monday, Mr. President.
Any objection to the suspension of the consideration of the said measures? Hearing none, approved. Senator Gordon?
Yes, Mr. President, I would just like to make a query and a correction perhaps. Yesterday in the journal, it appeared that the referral of resolution filed by one of our colleagues to ask for an investigation of President Duterte and his daughter, Mayor Sara Carpio, was initially referred to the Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies. Now, I know that Senator Escudero has said he's willing to do that, but I was not here when suddenly it was referred again to the Committee on Blue Ribbon, Mr. President.
There was no initial referral, Senator. There's only one referral, and it was directly to the Blue Ribbon as primary and to the Banks Committee as secondary.
Well, I'm just making a statement, Your Honor. It appears that it was referred to the
so the
Committee on
journal
Banks.
is mistaken. What page, sir?
In the journal.
What page?
This is on the last page, 1426. On the right side, Mr. President.
Yes, sir, I see it. So the journal that did not reflect correctly what happened. So, Majority Leader, how do we proceed?
Mr. President, I move to reconsider the approval of the journal of Monday, February 5, 2018.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
But before we go on, Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I would just like to make a manifestation here. At first glance, the logical conclusion that the resolution of Senator Trillanes 6 is a finding of probable fault into the President that he violated AMLA, Mr. President. Such cannot prima facie be in the jurisdiction of the Blue Ribbon Committee. If a citizen and here a senator feels that the President must be investigated, the proper jurisdiction is lodged in the House of Representatives, Mr. President. They are the ones who must determine possible violations of the AMLA by the Chief Executive, Mr. President. The rationale and point of an investigation into the acts of the President is an impeachment proceeding, which, if successful, will go into a full-blown trial before the Senate acting as an impeachment court. I will consult with the rest of the members of the Blue Ribbon Committee on how to move forward, bearing in mind that any statement made in a hearing that may be conducted could be construed as having a prejudge of a possible impeachment trial, Mr. President. We also need to tackle first the issue of whether or not the head of a co-equal branch can be compelled if prior invitations are refused to appear here. That is why I suggest that we tarry a little, Mr. President, you could also refer this to the proper thing to do would be to file a case, in which case they can file it in the Ombudsman, which in turn would recommend the President for impeachment if that is her pleasure or her judgment. So I think that it would really affect not only our relationship but our working here in the Congress if we look into this case, because I think ultimately the logical conclusion would be impeachment, in which case it should be the House of Representatives who should handle this, Mr. President. I submit, Mr. President.
Thank you for that, Senator Gordon. Majority Leader, let us first correct the journal and
Yes,
the
sir.
entry in the journal. Before we do that, Minority Leader is recognized.
Mr. President, before we act on that, as we know, every session we have this order of business wherein the resolutions, the bills, etc., are listed, and there is already an initial recommendation by the Secretary where the matter should be referred. May I know in yesterday's order of business where the recommendation was made on the reference of this particular bill was? Where is it? So that before we say that the journal
Yes.
does not reflect it accurately?
It was at the tail end of the session yesterday, and it was referred to the Blue Ribbon primarily and to the bank secondarily.
Is that what the records show? Is that what our order of business
Yes, sir.
indicated?
The additional reference of business.
additional-
Yes, sir.
yes.
And that's what I did.
All right.
I personally
all right.
did it
Just to
yesterday.
clarify, Just a point of
So,
information.
Thank you.
we thank Senator
Therefore-
Gordon for pointing this out. So,
Yes,
Majority
now,
Leader.
let's resolve it one by one, Mr. President. The first is that a true reflection of what transpired yesterday, now that we have opened the period, or the journal again, the correct reflection is that the Senate President referred the resolution 602 to the Committee on Public Accountability, Accountability of Public Officers, I should say, Mr. President, or the Blue Ribbon, and then the Committee on Banks secondarily.
Yes, sir.
So I move that correction be made.
Let the correction be made.
Now, I move to approve the journal of February 5, 2018, Mr. President,
As corrected.
as corrected.
Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, approved.
Now, as to the question posed by Senator Gordon, I do not have a ready answer, Mr. President, so I move that the issue raised be referred to the Committee on Rules.
Senator Drilon.
Mr. President, the moment a matter is referred to the committee by the plenary, the committee has jurisdiction. Now, I can understand and I can see, I can understand the points raised by Senator Gordon, but isn't it the more appropriate procedure that the committee, the Blue Ribbon Committee, now meets, having been because to that committee the resolution was submitted, and decide that indeed this is how it should be disposed of. In fact, that's provided in our rules, that the committee shall make an initial finding of its jurisdiction. So I believe that the proper procedure is for the committee to meet and dispose of the referral. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. But,
Mr. President,
Senator Gordon, yes,
I
sir.
agree with Senator Dillon. In fact, if you will look at the record, I said I will consult with the rest of the members of the Blue Ribbon Committee on how to move forward, bearing in mind that any statement made in a hearing that may be conducted could be construed as having prejudged a possible impeachment trial. That's why I was very careful. You know, I don't usually read my speeches, but I wanted to make sure I read this on the record para hindi tayo magkamali. And that is how I intend to proceed, Mr. President.
All right, in that
Majority
case,
Leader.
Mr. President, I withdraw my motion, Mr.
Okay.
President.
Thank you for
So, nothing has changed. The referral stands.
Yes.
That is very clear.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Mr. President, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1636 under Committee Report 213.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
This is the measure on the Lifetime Cell Phone Number Act. The parliamentary status of the measure is that we've started the period of interpellation yesterday. So may we recognize the sponsor, Chair of the Committee on Economic Affairs, Senator Win Gatchalian. And perhaps to continue interpellation is the Minority Leader who has asked that we be given copies of the 26 permits.
The sponsor, Senator Gatchalian, is recognized, and to continue with this interpellation, the Minority Leader.
Mr. President, as the records will show, I have actually terminated, I have manifested
Yes.
that we have no more questions, but we continue the period of interpellation because of the commitment of the sponsor and our request, which was endorsed by the Majority Leader and the Senate President, that the sponsor will kindly provide us with the 26 or so permits, licenses, which are required before a service provider can put up a cell site. which is one of the reasons cited for the delay in putting up of the cell site, which requires 9 months period. So our our agreement yesterday, Mr. President, as the records will show, is that the good sponsor will just provide us with a copy of these 26 licenses required, and from there we can specifically direct the Senate panel to the anti-red tape bicameral committee deliberations to take up and remove the unnecessary permits that is presently being required of a telecommunications company before a cell site can be put up. So at this stage, Mr. President, may we know from the good sponsor if indeed he has this listing?
Yes, with the permission of the sponsor and Senator Drilon.
Yes.
Senator Zubiri, yes, sir.
Senator Drilon, I guess I'll be able to answer the good senator, as it's my committee that's handling the anti-red tape amendments. We just had a meeting today with our counterparts in the House, a small BICAM, and the BICAM will be on Monday next week here in the Senate. And we discussed the problem on cell sites. And we already included in the amended BICAM version that all national government agencies and local government agencies will be in scope of the measure. So when you apply now for cell sites, kasama na sila. In other words, the requirement, the rudimentary period, will apply to application also for cell sites. Your Honor.
Mr. President, in the debates yesterday, what came out were permits for occupancy of the cell site, which is required by the National Building Code. Sanitary permits for the cell site. Barangay clearances, which obviously, if you look at it, would be imposed on construction of the cell site because of the general laws on the point. So that is why we had requested for the specific licenses, so that we can in the bicameral conference committee and in the report and in the law, we can specify which of these will no longer be required before a cell site can be constructed. Obviously, if we do not include this in the law, a building permit would still be there because this is under the National Building Code.
Yes. I believe, I'm not sure, Mr. President, if we need a special law on the, or create a law for the cell site construction.
No. We are not. We are just saying that in the Anti-Red Tape Act, we should include a specific provision which would eliminate this red tape in this specific economic activity.
The only problem, Mr. President, I foresee, and I'm one with you, sir, I'm 200% with you. The only thing that I foresee that there are certain bodies like the local government, the barangay councils and local government units that come up with numerous, so many numerous requirements for certain permits. What we're doing is to come up with limited time for them to act on it. But I do not know if we can actually limit their power of creating ordinances or requirements for that particular certificate or license. That's a question. I'm not a lawyer, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
but, yes,
the
Mr.
plenary power of Congress would certainly justify the exercise of such power to delimit the powers of the barangay in issuing permits.
If there's a particular provision that he's, or a section that he would like to include in the anti-red tape bicameral conference, we'll accept, Mr. President, subject to style, on that particular issue.
That's why we're asking for the listing,
Yes.
so that we can intelligently discuss and proceed.
That's correct.
Yes.
Do we have a list of the 26 alleged permits and steps that we need to take before a cell site is actually built?
It's not in our law, sir, because our law is general in nature.
The sponsor.
Oh, the sponsor.
Yeah,
And
because it was the sponsor who committed to give
Yes, sir.
the list. Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. President. Then I revert back to
Yes,
the
sir.
sponsor of the measure.
Then the Senate panel involved in the BICAM for the anti-red tape can benefit from the discussion and from the insights that we will be able to get from the list. But I think we need the list.
Yes,
That's
as an initial
the agreement, yeah.
data. And that was our agreement yesterday.
Is the sponsor ready to respond? Senator Win Gatchalian.
Yes, Mr. President. I inquired from several telcos as well as the ICT as well as other sources, and let me just show the body a few of the permits and licensing that an applicant need to acquire before putting up a cell site, Mr. President.
Let us have suspend the session for a few minutes.
1 minute suspension. Oh, binigay ko na. Binigay ko na. Binigay ko na sa kanya. May kopya na siya. Binigay ko doon sa page.
Ready to resume, Mr. President?
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, we are in receipt of the request of the Minority Leader, the list of the 26 permits necessary to put up a cell site. So there is an arrangement that the sponsor and Senator Subiri, through the intercession of, or through the request of the Minority Leader, will look into the possibility of incorporating it into the ARTA, or the anti-red tape law or bill, Mr. President, which is in BICAM right now. So that is indeed a possibility. So at this point, we still continue with the period of amendments, but recognize Senator Gatchalian and Senator Lacson. Senator Ping Lacson is ready to introduce an amendment, Mr. President.
We were, Majority Leader, we are still in the period for interpellations, I think.
I'm sorry, Mr. President. Yes, I stand corrected. We are in the period of interpellations. So,
Is Senator Lacson interpellating?
we're ready to close the period of interpellation, Mr. President. So I move to close.
Any objection? Sponsor, okay. Hearing none, we close the period for interpellations for this measure.
I move to open the period of amendments, Mr. President, considering that this is a substitute bill, so it is the individual amendments to be opened.
Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, we are now in the period for individual amendments.
Di pa ready? Mr. President, we are not ready to accept the individual amendment, so I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1636 under Committee Report 213, and we'll take it up tomorrow, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
There are two other items on the table, Mr. President. This is the committee Senate Bill 1317 and a resolution by Senator Manny Pacquiao. So in the meantime, I move to suspend the session for a few minutes, Mr. President.
Session is suspended.
Ready to resume, Mr. President?
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1317 under Committee Report 100.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
This is the measure on occupational safety and health standards. The parliamentary status of the measure is that we are in the period of interpellation. So may we recognize the sponsor, Senator, the Chairman of Labor, Employment and Human Resource Development, Senator Joel Villanueva, and to interpellate the Minority Leader, Senator Frank
The
Belon.
sponsor, Senator Villanueva, is recognized, and for interpellation, the Minority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let me make some opening statement on the previous interpellation. If you would recall, Mr. President, the gentleman from Iloilo, our distinguished Minority Floor Leader, highlighted several points that we need to consider, Mr. President. First is that the need to incentivize establishments to comply with OSH standards. We express our full-hearted agreement with this proposal, and thus propose that the DOLE, Department of Labor and Employment, develop a system of incentives to recognize the efforts of the employers toward ensuring their compliance with OSH and other general standards. In addition also, Mr. President, we clarified that the administrative penalties will depend on the frequency, severity, and damage cost. Another, Mr. President, the honorable gentleman, our distinguished Minority Floor Leader, also expressed his concerns on the unqualified imposition of the standards in the bill, regardless of the risk or hazard involved, nature of business of the employer, and the number of its employees. We take in full consideration the sentiments of our Minority Floor Leader, and we understand the gentleman's concern. And for this, we propose that the OSH standards to be set by the Secretary of Labor in connection, of course, with RA 10395, which is the tripartisan law. The DOLE will vary based on the number of employees, nature of operations, and the risk or hazard involved in the establishments, projects, sites, and all other workplaces. Meaning, Mr. President, while fire safety is a requirement for all establishments, the number and type of fire extinguishers or installation and number of sprinklers will not be uniform for all. The same with the personal protective equipments to be used, which should correspond to the type of hazards. Mr. President, the appointment also of full-time safety officers, creation and size of OSH committee, among others, will also depend on the nature of the business of the establishment, the number of its employees, and the risk or hazard involved in its business. Thus, Mr. President, we have also clarified that the Department of Labor shall promulgate the appropriate standards for micro and small enterprises employing less than 10 and less than 100 employees, respectively. Third, Mr. President, the gentleman, our distinguished Minority Floor Leader, also pointed out his concern on the submission of periodic reports with regard to their OSH compliance. Unfortunately, Mr. President, during the previous interpellation, the Department of Labor and Employment admitted that while this requirement is already in place under current regulations, this is not being followed. And DOLE does not have the capacity to monitor compliance and read all the reports submitted. And that's why we joined the statements made by our Minority Floor Leader. And with this, we propose to delete the specific section in the bill, especially since we do not want to burden the employers with reportorial requirements that the implementing agency has no use, and it cannot monitor, Mr. President. The DOLE, however, as in the exercise of its rule-making power, may require the certain reports be submitted to it. Fourth, and lastly, Mr. President, the Minority Floor Leader also pointed out that the bill seems to give broad discretion to labor law inspectors with regard the determination of compliance with the OSHA standards. And we agreed that in addressing this, we are proposing that the inspection be done with representatives from the labor and employer sectors. And this will be in Section 22, Mr. President. With this, Mr. President, we hope that we'll be able to address all the issues and concerns by our Minority Floor Leader and some of our colleagues that talk to this representation in ensuring that we will be passing a landmark legislation that would really help our workers and at the same time our employers. We do not want, Mr. President, a repeat of the recent incidents in NCC Mall, the house technology industries last year, the Kentex factory fire in 2015, the collapse of the scaffolding during the construction of Eaton properties in Makati, among others, Mr. President. And that's why this representation urged my colleagues in this distinguished chamber to support the immediate passage of this bill. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Yeah, Mr. President, thank you very much. Yes, we acknowledge that in the off-session discussion we had with the good sponsor, he discussed with us and we were given a brief on the intended amendments that will be introduced in response to the concerns that were raised in the period of interpellation, and in general, we are satisfied with the proposed amendments that will be introduced at the appropriate time by the good sponsor as part of the committee amendments. There are just a few matters that we wish to discuss, and we will terminate our interpellation today to enable the bill to move forward to the period of amendments. With the permission of the gentleman,
Please.
Yes. Sponsor, can we refer to Section 6 of the proposed measure?
Section 6.
The worker's right of refusal to work. All right? The provision reads, the worker has the right of refusal to work without threat or reprisal from the employer if, as determined by the law, an imminent danger situation exists in the workplace that may result to illness, injury, death, and corrective action to eliminate danger have not been undertaken by the employer. How do we implement this, Mr. President? I find a little difficulty figuring out how this will be implemented. For example, we thought that the remedy here will be for the Department of Labor to stop the operations where the operations of the company where the recommendations of the Department of Labor is not complied with, just to stop the operation so that the danger to the workers will cease. Now, so when does the right to refuse to work take place? And if they refuse to work, will there be payment of wages? If the gentleman can walk us through this specific provision.
I was told, Mr. President, that currently, if there is a refusal to work based on the report made by the Department of Labor and Employment, and again, in the bill that we are trying to pass here, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's just the Department of Labor and Employment, but with the tripartisan law, it requires that the DOLE shall consult with the tripartite industrial peace councils before it can issue any rules and regulations. But the distinguished minority leader is correct. We can also apply the idea of the Department of Labor stopping the operation of the if indeed there is a clear imminent danger, Mr. President.
Yeah, because I think that's a better system than allowing the worker to make a determination that he will not report for work. And if you multiply that
Yeah.
100 times, you'll have a walkout on the conclusion that the employer has not complied with the order of the Department of Labor, because there are always two sides of the question.
Yeah.
This is a question of fact, and I am afraid that if you leave to the parties the prerogative to determine the existence of a possible danger, that will result in chaos. So maybe the better remedy is to empower the Department of Labor in serious cases to order the cessation of operation, rather than allowing the worker the discretion to walk out, and all kinds of questions will be raised.
We understand where the former Dole secretary is coming from, and we submit to his wisdom, Mr. President.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. So the appropriate amendment will be made at the appropriate time. On Section 29 of the committee of the bill, there is an enumeration of what are considered as unlawful acts. And the penalty is an administrative fine. We noticed that the acts enumerated are not necessarily related to the cause of the violation, or to the violation of the safety standard itself. For example, when so the question that we are raising is, would the penalties under Section 29 apply in addition to the possible penalties that may be incurred for the violation of the standard itself? Example, if the standard requires fire extinguishers, 10 fire extinguishers, and the penalty is, I don't know, let's say the penalty is a fine of 10,000 pesos. Now, the employer refuses entry to the Department of Labor inspector. Is that, who will try to inspect whether or not there are enough fire extinguishers? Is the penalty in addition to the penalty for non-compliance with the standard? In other words, it's a separate offense.
Separate offense. So in addition.
Huh?
So, in addition? The answer is in the affirmative. It's in addition to the violation, Mr. President. For example, in that case of not having enough fire extinguisher.
But are there penalties for violation of standards?
Yes.
Because I could not find
Yes.
any.
Yes.
Where is that?
It's the no. It's in letter G of Section 29 under gross negligence of the employers, Mr. President. Contractors or subcontractors in complying with the provisions of OSHA standards. And let me point out, Mr. President, that it has to be gross.
So there must be a finding. Why are we
Mr.
imposing
President, may I also state for the record that the intention here is to correct the violation, the employer for not complying with OSHA standards.
Yes.
So it's not like when they found out that right away they would immediately punish and
let us take as an
fees.
example. All right. Under Section 29A, the following are considered unlawful acts obstruction, delay, or refusal to provide labor compliance officer or any authorized persons by the Secretary of Labor and Employment access to the establishment, project, site, or place where the work is being undertaken. For this, the employer is fined with a maximum of 100,000 per day. And yet, this is in addition to, or in addition to the principal violation of safety standards.
May I ask for 1 minute suspension,
Yes,
Mr. President? I didn't get the...
Session suspend.
Thank you.
Ano ba ito? Bakit nila pinapanis? Kaya ano ito nakikita niyo?
Hindi kasi binabang... Una pala.
Ha? Pero saan yun? Saan yun?
Yun nga, yun yung question natin sa kasi wala pa.
Wala. Saan yung sinasabi yung section na? Ha?
29,
Section
letter G.
29, letter G. Gross negligence.
So, isa lang dito. Hindi ba pwede na isa, dalawa, ganun?
Tapos magbabari could be 50,000 for obstruction. Kung talaga makita niyo yung gross violation, then you have a number. Hindi naman yung buong 100,000 ang kada violation na yun.
Check ko lang kung anong question.
Pwede naman mag-amend. Kung gusto nyo yung repeated refusal, repeated obstruction. Hindi naman repeated. Kasi sa one ko is criminal ka na dito obstruction. Dito hindi mo.
Hindi kasi po pwede na wala sa batas eh. Hindi mo naman sasabihin 3 times ano. So parang ang ano ko na lang is that during the break, we discussed already
in addition. Okay. The session is resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President. During the break, Mr. President, the gentleman from Iloilo in this representation talked about the importance of ensuring that we will be very clear with this particular section, Unlawful Act, Section 29, and we will propose at the proper time the amendments based on the concerns of the Minority Floor Leader. Thank you, Mr. President.
And we do, yes, Mr. President, we have discussed that, and we can leave this provision with that understanding, just so to finish this period of interpretation. By the way, this section also provides for imprisonment and of the offender. We understand that this will be deleted when at the appropriate time.
Yes, I concur, Mr. President.
On section 22, on section 22, during the last time that we availed of the period of interpellation, is our recollection correct that this expanded visitorial powers of the Secretary of Labor and Employment would require hiring of 200 additional people?
I'm sorry, Mr. President, I didn't get the...
On section 22, on
Yes.
the visitorial powers of the Secretary of Labor and Employment, do we recall, is our recollection correct that the expanded authority to enforce the mandatory occupational safety and health standards, broad as it is in the original bill, would entail the hiring of 200 additional inspectors in the Department of Labor?
Yes, Mr. President. In fact, these items is actually part of this year's budget, Mr. President.
Again, this
year's budget,
in the
Mr. President.
2018 budget,
18 budget, Mr. President.
there is already a provision for
The hiring.
the hiring of 200
Yes, 200 additional.
additional for a budget of 350 million pesos.
Is that correct?
Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. President.
I am reminded of the principle in labor law, feather bedding. I'm sure you ask your technical people the principle of feather bedding.
Feather bedding.
I'm sure that your technical people in the Department of Labor would understand what I'm saying.
I hope not.
The principle of feather bedding is that you make work, you create work in order to hire more people. But that is a matter, that's another matter. Obviously, it's a policy decision of the Department of Budget. On the one hand, we have a right-sizing bill. On the other, we provide for an additional hiring of 200 people because of the expanded power, which really, if the original proposal will be approved into law, maybe you need 2,000, not only 200. But in any case,
Thank you.
as we said, That is now a matter that is in the budget. It is authorized. No matter what kind of bill we come out with here, if the budget will authorize the creation of 200 more positions, that is a matter that is beyond us to debate on. In any case, Mr. President, for the sake of time, we have no more questions on the understanding that before the committee, that we will be given ample opportunity to review the proposed committee amendments so that we can ask questions at that time and propose amendments if necessary in order to let this bill move. We have no more questions, Mr. President.
How do you want this committee amendments na para magkaroon ng clean copy? Sige, Tito Sen?
No.
Committee amendments na para magkaroon ng clean copy.
Mr. President, there are no more interpreters. I move to close the period of interpellation.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Move to open the period of committee amendments. This is not a substitute bill.
And
Thank you, Mr.
Any
President.
objection? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 2, line 8, after the word sector, delete the period and replace it with a semicolon. On the same page, Mr. President, line 22, after...
Sorry.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
yes, with the permission of the
Please.
gentleman, to expedite and to make it more there will be a number of amendments which will affect various portions of the bill. I have been made familiar already with the amendments. May I propose that we do not approve the amendments individually. Let the committee propose all the amendments. We have an overview of what the bill will look like after the amendments, and at that point, give us an opportunity to raise objections on the specific committee amendments, so that may we request that it be introduced, have a clean copy, and then we act on it with the amendments already on record. Meaning to approve or disapprove.
Mr. President, yes, that is a possibility. There is no objection. What we can do is that we will ask the chairman of the Committee of Labor to introduce the committee amendments as if he was submitting a copy of the committee report. And therefore, after that, it will be deemed submitted. We can ask for a clean copy. There will be no action taken to either close or approve or accept the period of committee amendments, Mr. President. Yeah, tapos na interpellation.
Just proceed.
Yes, therefore, may we now recognize Senator Villanueva to introduce all the committee amendments in total. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes.
This is,
Thank you. Go
please
ahead.
bear with me, this is quite long. On page 2, line 3, after the word other, delete from the word places and replace it with workplaces. After, insert the words, the Secretary of Labor and Employment shall issue the appropriate standards of occupational health and safety based on. On the same page,
Excuse me, Senator Villanueva. We are trying to follow what you're saying, but I think the agreement is for you to just move for the committee amendments, committee amendments, which is
Yes.
the one indicated in the committee report. Oh, committee, and then after you make them of record, we will now reproduce clean copies, proceeding on the assumption that they have been all approved. Then that clean copy will now be the one used in our individual amendments, period.
may I just ask for 1 minute
Okay,
suspension?
session suspended. Tama, di ba? Nalito, wala siya rito, di ba? Saan niyo ba yung proposal ni Tito Sen? Balik tayo sa the usual procedure. Of committee, then individual ulit, then isa.
Individual.
Sir, kasi parang tayo.
We ready to resume, Mr.
Our
President?
session is resumed.
Let us start from the very beginning, Mr. President. We will ask this chairman to introduce the committee amendments
Thank
as
you.
presented in the committee report.
Senator Villanueva is
Thank you very much,
recognized.
Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. On page 2, line 8, after the word sector, delete the period and replace it with a semicolon.
Any objection? Approved.
On the same page, line 22, after the word employee/worker, delete the period and replace it with a semicolon.
Any objection?
On the same page, line 44, delete the number 162 and replace it with 168.
Any objection?
On the same page, line 45, delete the number 165 and replace it with 171.
Any objection?
On page 9, line 20, correct the spelling of the word imminent to imminent by adding a letter T to the said word.
To change the
The
name,
word imminent to
the-
imminent.
the name of the rap singer to imminent. Any objection? Approved.
That's M&M, Mr. President.
Okay.
On page 10, line 15, correct the spelling of the word authorized. To authorize, Mr. President.
Any
There's a-
objection? Approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the same page, line 16, after the word where, delete the word
That's not a
work
word.
compliance RK. It's not a word, sorry, Mr. President. And
Yes,
replace it with the word work.
These are all styling. Any objection? Approved.
On page 11, line 5, after the figure 250,000 and punctuation comma, delete the phrase or imprisonment of not less than 1 year and insert a period in lieu thereof, Mr. President.
Any objection?
On same page, delete the entire line 6.
Any objection?
On the same page, line 15, after the figure 500,000 and punctuation comma, delete the phrase or imprisonment of not less than 6 years and 1 day, but not, and insert a period in lieu thereof.
Any objection?
On same page, delete the entire line 16.
Any objection?
On the same page, line 39, after the word transportation, delete the phrase and communication. And
Any objection?
on the same page,
Delete the phrase and communication. Okay.
delete the phrase and communication.
Any
yes.
objection?
On same page and on same line, delete the acronym DOTC and replace it with DOTR.
Any objection?
That'll be all, Mr. President.
President, I move to close the period of committee amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none, we close the said period.
I now move to open the period of individual amendments,
And,
and to facilitate the proceedings, we will merely ask the committee chair to read all into the records, and approval comes tomorrow, Mr. President, after we have a clean copy.
Thank you.
That is the request of the minority leader, Mr. President.
Okay, so it will just be read, no...
Read
I
into
will
the
not
records.
ask for...
So we'll have a clear
Yes.
there will be
copy.
objection. Okay, so is there any objection to the procedure outlined by the majority leader? There being none, we follow the said procedure.
Thank you.
So
Mr. President.
the sponsor is recognized to introduce his individual amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 2, line 3, after the word other, delete from the word places and replace it with workplaces. After, insert the words, the Secretary of Labor and Employment shall issue the appropriate standards of occupational health and safety based on. On the same page, between lines 5 and 6, insert another section. Section 3, applicability to micro and small enterprises, MSEs, specific to micro and small enterprises. The Secretary of Labor and Employment, considering the risk hazard involved, shall develop appropriate OSH standards to include housekeeping, materials handling and storage, electrical and mechanical safety, chemical safety, emergency preparedness, fire safety, and PPE. Renumbered the sections accordingly. On the same page, delete lines 7 and 8, adjust the letters accordingly. On the same page, insert between lines 19 and 20 a new phrase. Letter C, covered workplaces refers to establishments, projects, sites, and all other places where work is being undertaken, the number of employees, nature of operations, and risk or hazard involved in its business of which, as determined by the Secretary of Labor and Employment, require compliance with the provisions of Chapter 3 of this Act. Adjust the letters accordingly. On the same page, line 22, after the word employer, delete worker. On the same page, insert between lines 37 and 38 a new phrase. Letter H, micro and small enterprises, MSEs, refers to establishment employing less than 10 and less than 100 employees respectively. Adjust the letters accordingly. On the same page, in line 43, after the word standards, delete the word prepare and replace it with issued. On the same page and same line, after the word delete the word department and replace it with secretary. On the same page in line 44, after the word dole, delete the phrase as provided for by law in and insert the word pursuant to. On the same page and same line, after number 6, delete 2 and replace it with number 8. On the same page in line 45, delete the number 165 and replace it with 175 as renumbered. On the same page, line 46, after the word amended, insert and such other standards as may be issued pursuant to this Act. On page 3, lines 10 to 11, delete from the word a until other and replace it with all. On the same page, in lines 24 to 25, delete the comma after the word work until employer. On the same page, in line 47, delete the second end. On page 4, line 3, delete the period and insert a semicolon and the word end after the semicolon. On the same page, insert between lines 4 and 5 a new phrase. Number 6, allow workers and their safety and health representatives to participate actively in the process of organizing, planning, and implementing and evaluating for improvement of safety and health in the workplace. On the same page, line 7, after the word delete the word workers. On the same page, line 8, after the word workplace, insert a period. On the same page, in lines 8 and 9, delete the word MD and insert the phrase, they shall observe the prescribed. On the same page, in lines 14 and 15, delete the words or enforcement agent. On the same page, in lines 17 and 18, insert a new phrase, letter D, whenever 2 or more undertakings are engaged in activities simultaneously at one workplace, it shall be the duty of all engaged to collaborate in the application of OSH standards and regulations. Page 5. In lines 6 and 7, delete the words all establishments, projects, sites, and all other places where work is being undertaken and replace it with the words shall have a safety and health program. On the same page, in line 8, delete the word containing and replace with including but not limited to the following. On the same page, in line 32, insert the words in consultation with the workers and their representatives. On the same page, in lines 35 and 36, insert the phrase, the approved safety and health program shall be communicated and be made readily accessible to all persons at their place of work. Renumber the sections accordingly. On the same page, lines 36 and 37, delete the words all establishments, projects, sites, and all other places where work is being undertaken and replace it with the words covered workplaces. On the same page, in lines 45 and 46, delete the words workers are and replace it with the words establishment is. On the same page, in line 47, delete the words as members. Page 6, Mr. President. In lines 5 and 6, delete the words all establishments, projects, sites, and all other places where work is being undertaken and replace it with the words covered workplaces. On the same page, line 6, delete the word full-time. On the same page, line 15, insert the words and requirement before the words of safety officers. On the same page, line 16, delete the word and right before the words the size of the work area. On the same page, line 16, insert a comma right after the words the size of the work area. On the same page, line 16, insert the word "and such other criteria" right after the words "the size of the work area." On the same page, line 16, insert the words "may be" right before the words "prescribed by the DOLE. On the same page, line 22, delete the words "all establishments, project sites, and all other places where work is being undertaken" and replace with the words "covered workplaces." On the same page, line 26, insert the words "and the risk of hazard involved" right before the words "and the risk or hazard involved." Page 7, Mr. President, lines 9 and 10, delete the phrase "all occupational health personnel shall undergo the minimum safety and health training as prescribed by the DOLE." On the same page, lines 22 to 35, delete the entire section 17, renumber the sections accordingly. On the same page, line 39, insert the words "or the Professional Regulatory Commission" as the case may be right after the words "Skills Development Authority" or TESDA. On page 8, line 5, delete the words "the following." On the same page, line 6, insert the words "including but not limited to the following" right before the words "ensure humane working conditions." On the same page, line 15, delete the words "a mandatory and" and replace with the word "an." On the same page, line 16, insert a period after the words "operation cost." On the same page, line 16, insert the words "it shall be." On the same page, line 31, delete the words "have the authority to." On the same page, line 31, insert the word "the" right before the words "mandatory occupational." On the same page, line 32, delete the words "in all establishments" right before the words "and conduct." On the same page, line 33, insert the words "representatives from the right before the words "labor and employer." On the same page, line 33, replace the words "representatives" with "sectors." And lastly, Mr. President, on the same page, line 33, delete the words "to ensure" before the words "spot audit" and replace with the word "on." Hindi pa pala tapos, sorry. On page 9, lines 5, 6, and 7, delete the words "or the Secretary's duly authorized representatives shall inspect all establishments and workplaces regardless of the size and nature of operation" and. On the same page, line 7, delete the word "self-inspection" or right before the words "shall disallow." On the same page, line 9, delete the words "however charactered" and replace with the word chartered, sorry, Mr. President. "However chartered" and replace with the word "chartered." On the same page, line 16, add the word "affected" right after the words "paid the." On the same page, line 27, delete the word "labor" right before the word "organizations." On the same page, line 27, insert the words "of labor" right after the word "organizations." On the same page, line 27, delete the word "federations" and replace with "employers." On the same page, lines 27 and 28, delete the words "general labor standards" and. On the same page, line 33, delete the words "in addition to the preceding sections" and. In addition to the preceding sections, "the" and replace with the word "the" with the capital T. On the same page, line 34, insert the words "and relevant stakeholders" right after the words "government agencies." On the same page, line 36, delete the period right after the words "health hazards" and replace with a comma. On the same page, line 36, insert the words "depending on the number of employees of the establishment, the nature of its business operations, and the risk of hazard involved" right after the words "health hazard." Page 10, Mr. President, starting from line 4, insert the section "incentives to employers." There shall be established package of incentives under such rules and regulations as may be promulgated by DOLE to deserving employers to recognize their initiatives toward ensuring compliance on OSH and general labor standards such as OSH training packages, additional protective equipment, technical guidance, recognition, and awards, and other similar incentives. Adjust the sections accordingly. On the same page, delete lines 14 to 24 and insert the following. Letter A. Ito na ba yun kanina? Obstruction, delay, or refusal to provide the Secretary of Labor and Employment or any of its authorized representatives access to the establishment, project, site, or place where work compliance is being undertaken or refusal to provide or access to relevant records and documents or obstruct the conduct of investigation of any fact necessary in determining compliance with OSH standards. Letter B, misrepresentation in relation to adherence to OSH standards, knowing such statement, report, or record submitted to the DOLE to be false in any material aspect. Letter C, making retaliatory measures such as termination of employment, refusal to pay, or reducing wages and benefits, or in any manner discriminates against any worker who was given information relative to the inspection being conducted, or. On the same page, line 25, delete the words making any statement, report, or representation right before the words in relation to adherence. On the same page, line 25, insert the word misrepresentation right before the words in relation to adherence to OSH. On the same page, line 26, insert the word submitted to DOLE right after the words report or record. On the same page, lines 30 and 31, delete the words in relation to letter C hereof. On the same page, line 31, insert the words relative to the inspection being conducted, or. On the same page, line 32, delete the word failure right up before the words to comply with compliance orders and replace with the words gross negligence or deliberate failure of the employers, contractors, or subcontractors. On the same page, line 32, replace the words issued by with required OSH standards or compliance order. On the same page, lines 31 and 34, delete the words representatives based on the findings of violations by the labor compliance officers and replace with representative. On the same page, lines 35 to 36, delete the words gross negligence of the employers, contractors, or subcontractors in complying with the provisions of OSH standards, or. On the same page, lines 37 to 38, delete the words letter H, failure to implement OSH standards, including the failure to report accidents in the workplace. On the same page, line 42, delete the words the violation is committed or such amount that may be determined by the Secretary of Labor and Employment. On the same page, lines 43 and 44, delete the words has ceased or right before the words until the violation. On the same page, line 44, insert a period right after the words is corrected. On the same page, line 44, insert the words for this purpose, the Secretary of Labor, in consultation with relevant stakeholders, shall issue a list of offenses with corresponding administrative fines depending on the severity, frequency, and damage caused, right after the words is corrected. Page 11, please bear with me, Mr. President. On page 11, lines 2 to 10, delete the whole paragraph. On the same page, lines 12 to 16, delete the whole paragraph. On the same page, lines 18 to 21, delete the whole paragraph. On the same page, lines 23 to 24, delete the whole phrase. On the same page, lines 29 to 34, delete the whole paragraph and adjust the sections accordingly. On the same page, line 42, insert the words Philippine Economic Zone Authority, PEZA, Department of Information and Communications Technology, DICT, right after the words Department of Health, DOH. Last page, Mr. President, page 12, starting from line 1, insert a new section, updated DOLE computerized labor law compliance system. The Secretary of Labor and Employment shall maintain an updated system of computerized gathering and generation of real-time data on compliances, monitoring of enforcement, and a system of notification on workplace accidents and injuries. Adjust the sections accordingly. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor.
Thank you. Mr. President, with the consent of the Chamber, those are the proposed amendments by Senator Villanueva in the period of individual amendments. We will now ask that the Senate President direct the Secretariat to furnish us a clean copy so that we can go through it and perhaps by tomorrow or at the latest Monday approve the period of individual amendments.
Secretariat, please comply with the request of the Majority Leader and let us reflect those amendments read by the sponsor as if they had been accepted and approved.
So, Mr. President, therefore, technically, those amendments are pending approval by the body, Mr.
That's
President.
correct. Yes.
Thank you. So, in the meantime, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1317, under Committee Report 100.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, may we have the second additional reference of business?
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
A second additional reference of business, PS number, resolution number 607, a resolution directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an assessment of the implementation of the Republic Act 10654, otherwise known as an act to prevent, deter, and eliminate illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, amended RA 8550, otherwise known as the Philippine Fisheries Code of 1998, and for other purposes, Senator Cynthia Villar.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Food and Finance.
Peace Resolution number 608, resolution directing the proper Senate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the status of the National Food Authority's role in ensuring the stability of supply and price of rice. Senator Cynthia Villar.
To the Committee on Agriculture and Food.
Peace Resolution number 609, resolution directing the appropriate committee to review the legal framework of the Philippine immunization policy. Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel.
The Committee on Health and Demography.
Peace Resolution number 610, resolution recognizing and commending Jerwin Angcajas for successfully defending the IBF Junior Bantamweight crown in Corpus Christi, Texas. Senator Joel Villanueva.
To the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate President, I move to designate the Senate conferees to the conflicting provisions of Senate Bill 1103 and House Bill 6915. This is establishing the PUP Sablayan Campus Branch. So may we request the Senate President to appoint the conferees, Senator Escudero as chair and members Ejercito Aquino.
They are so designated.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, February 7, 2018.
Is there any objection? There being none, session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, February 7, 2018.